Hey, Adam Schefter is on the Comcast Business Hotline, and he's brought to you by Landis Block and Concrete. Adam was proving it just last week that you can create your very own jaw-dropping backyard paradise if you go to landisbc.com. I even sent him the pictures to prove it. He saw it. He believes it now. And Adam joins us on the Comcast Business Hotline. Adam, we're in a little bit of shock still and mourning period after the Super Bowl, but now everything has shifted to who are the next coordinators for the Eagles, and do you believe both candidates will come in-house, both candidates will come from out-of-house, or maybe a mix?
Oh, the offensive coordinator is going to be Brian Johnson. I don't think there's any question there. That you can take to the bank, basically. I mean, he's going to be the guy there as the offensive coordinator. The questions will be the defensive coordinator and who that's going to be, and that is not as clear-cut as the offensive coordinator. If Vic Fangio hadn't stayed or hadn't taken the Miami job, I think he would have been in prime consideration to get that job. But he flew to Miami yesterday, and he's under contract, and so it's not him. And, you know, it's unfortunate because the timing of these things is such that Jonathan Gannon didn't get that job till yesterday. Eagles didn't know. Vic Fangio didn't know. And I think that if the Eagles or the Cardinals had hired Gannon earlier, I think that Vic would have been square in the running.
Contracts can't, and you're saying the contracts of this ilk can't be broken?
No, he had an agreement with them. I'm not sure whether he signed it or not. I think he did, but I'm not even sure about that. But I think that it was a case where it would have been an option, but it's not.
Okay.
So they move on.
Adam, good to talk to you again. Of the veteran type of, you know, kind of, I don't want to use the word retread because that connotes a negative term, kind of. But who's out there that's respected and jobless if the Eagles do decide to go out of house with a more veteran type of coach? Are there any names out there that are being talked about around the league? For DC, that is.
Well, first of all, welcome back, Jamie. Secondly, I would say this, that, I mean, there have been so many teams with coordinator openings, and, you know, many of these teams have picked through who their guys are. You know, so, like, you know, the first thought I think of is, well, Jonathan Gannon went to Arizona, and Arizona had a defensive coordinator in Vance Joseph, so what happens to him? That's my first thought.
Okay.
As a defensive coordinator. That would be a guy I would think that maybe they'd want to talk to.
Is there any candidate in-house that you believe is going to get serious consideration?
There might be, but it's not as glaring as it is, say, Brian Johnson's
right.
offense.
Okay?
I'm sure there are people in-house that deserve and will get consideration, but I can't say that I know that as clearly as I do on the offensive side of football. Like, Brian Johnson, to me, you don't even have to talk about the offense coordinator. You got one. Great. All good. All set there.
Even though he's never called plays, that's not a problem?
If the Eagles don't want to hire him for the offensive coordinator, there were a half dozen other teams that would have handed him the job.
So he knew to stay, or no? Because he could have had a job offered to him, right?
100%. 100%. He would have been. He could have gotten multiple offensive coordinator opportunities. He was involved in the season, so teams are waiting for him and waiting to see whether they could talk to him. Like, you know, look, by the way, their season ends on Sunday night, and lo and behold, Baltimore hires an offensive coordinator yesterday.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, Washington starts interviewing Greg Roman, Eric Bieniemy. Tampa has got Thomas Brown from the Rams in today. Like, he was a big domino there, and I think people know he's not going anywhere.
Adam, you know, Jalen Hurts yesterday says all the right things in front of the media, that it's not time to think about the contract. He couldn't legally sign it until the end of this season anyway. But is it imperative to the Eagles to kind of beat these, Herberts and Burrows, and even Daniel Jones is going to make a good amount of coin. Is it important to their philosophy to beat these other quarterbacks to the market to kind of set the new market, or do they already kind of have a number in mind that they're going to be pretty much, settling at?
Well, first of all, Jalen can sign that contract now. That's what you mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's eligible to sign. And I don't think that type of thing is important, particularly. It's probably more important to the agents themselves who are negotiating the deal. And I think that Jalen Hurts, if he were drinking truth serum, or at least his people would know exactly where the deal is going to come in at, a ballpark range. And while, yes, you're paying attention to what Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert may get on the open market, I think that you have an idea of your value and your numbers and the guarantees, and you're going to be good at certain levels. Now, maybe, Joe Burrow blows that out of the water. And again, if I were the Eagles, I would want to do the deal with Hurts sooner rather than later. I'd want to do it ASAP. I wouldn't want to wait for anybody else. But I don't think Jalen Hurts is thinking about that. That's why you hire people to represent your interests and to negotiate that deal.
Well, I call BS on Jalen. He doesn't normally lie at him, but when $45 million a year is sitting in front of you, you're thinking about it.
He's got to be thinking about it.
I didn't say he wasn't thinking.
Yeah.
He knows he's getting.
Is that about the area you expect him to come in at? Like 45? Is Burrow and Herbert able to get to 50? Like, what are we looking at?
My guess is Hurts will be north of 45. 45 would be a starting point for him. Oof. Starting point.
Now, a few weeks ago when we were talking, it was the idea is that maybe both coordinators were going to come back, and then Steichen and Gannon get jobs. Are you surprised that both of them got jobs?
Probably, yeah. Both of them, yeah. I mean, I didn't think they'd lose. Oh, listen, last week, I started hearing rumblings about it, and
you told us last week. You told us you were hearing things, but it seemed to be Steichen.
Yeah, no. I could tell last week Steichen was in play, and then the funny thing was, last Thursday I started getting calls that Gannon was a prime candidate in Arizona, and it was met with denials from various people initially, and then as the weekend went on, the truth slowly surfaces, and then you could tell that he was going to be square in the mix. And it just continued to ramp up and accelerate from there. So, yeah, I think in the end, I'm a little surprised they lost both. I wasn't expecting that to be the case. I thought they'd lose at least one. But I think over the weekend, it became apparent that there was a real opportunity, a real chance that they were going to lose both.
I'll tell you this, it didn't cause the loss, but it certainly didn't look good on the NFL. George Toma should never touch a Super Bowl field again. That was a disgrace.
Well,
and I know.
Hold on. You know the weird thing about that
is what?
Is that the Cardinals have their own groundskeeper for that stadium and that field. And his last name is Levy. I forget his first name, but I bring it up because I watched the game on Sunday with Matthew Hasselbeck and Randy Moss and Teddy Bruschi. And, when you're sitting around with these guys, it's unbelievable the stuff that they bring up and the things that they see that you don't, right?
Sure.
And so they talked about two things before the game that were really interesting to me that I hadn't heard. And I said to Matthew, I'm like, I wish we had discussed this. It would have been great for the pregame show. Number one, they were talking about the Eagles' punting situation, the fact that Brett Kern was inactive and they went with
Sipos. Sipos. You won't have to say it again. You won't need to use that name again. I promise you.
Well, here's the deal. They're like, oh, this is interesting. The Eagles opted for the shorter end-over-end kicker whose punts are tougher to field. So the Chiefs are going to use somebody like Justin Watson unless they need a big return, and then they'll use Kadarius Toney. Before the game, they were saying this.
That's amazing.
Okay? okay, as you're sitting there. The other thing they said is Matthew Hasselbeck had a picture of the groundskeeper in Arizona because right away, first series, these guys are like, look at these guys slipping. How could that be? Arizona has one of the best groundskeepers. And Matthew took out a picture. He once had done a story with the groundskeeper leaving. Now, I got to look into this and figure this out. But I think George Toma does take over the field.
Well, here he does.
And
George Toma takes over the field. And by the way, his assistant for the Super Bowl field is a guy named Ed Mangan, who is the groundskeeper for the Atlanta Braves. So they take over. They're responsible for the Super Bowl field, not the home team's guy, but supposedly the home team's guy is also involved.
Well, I'll tell you the other thing that's interesting is they're like again, something that I would never know, but a player would. They paint those Super Bowl decals on the field.
Right.
Super Bowl 57. So it's not just the midfield. They're like, that's the worst stuff to go kick in. And when Butker missed the field goal, it was in the paint. It was in the decal. And then when they tried the game-winning field goal, it was just inside the decal on the grass.
It's incredible.
You do not want to be kicking from the added decals that are painted on. And so, again, there are little things that I would never have known as just, a guy who's watching the game that they knew. And I just thought it was fascinating. Like, they called that punting thing. We were talking about it pregame. They're like, oh, Brett Kern's inactive. Oh, that's really interesting. That means that the Eagles are opting for the tougher punts to field, and the Chiefs are going to play conservative. It was incredible. And then we were talking about they saw the players slipping right away.
Yeah,
right away. It was an issue to them, and it was a main issue all day. It was terrible. It was horrendous, and I don't know how they did. And the other thing that they complained about was before the game, they're like, one of these all-star officiating crews, the worst. You don't do it that way. Can you imagine if we were doing a Super Bowl telecast and we took Teddy Bruschi from ESPN and Nate Burleson from CBS and Howie Long from Fox and James Brown and put them all together and say, go work the Super Bowl show because you guys have all been great this year. Well, they haven't worked together.
Yeah.
They don't know how it works.
Adam,
you're better off with people who have worked together all year and know what people are doing and thinking and saying.
I just got one thing, quick reaction. What was Randy Moss's reaction to that final holding call on James Bradbury?
Well, Teddy thought it was holding. I don't remember. I think here's the deal.
I'm curious, a receiver.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the general consensus was penalty, ticky-tack, decides a game, unfortunate.
Don't call it there.
59 minutes, no holding calls, and then in the last minute,
Yeah, and by the way, it's like you deprive everybody of a great ending.
Yeah.
The penalty's not called, and then the Chiefs kick the field goal. Now Jalen Hurts gets the ball back with just under 2 minutes. They're down 3. Is he going to lead them to a field? Are we going to get overtime? Is he going to have a great victory in the last closing moment? Are the Chiefs going to hold on? Are we going to see the new overtime playoff rules for the first time? Like, there are all these there, but it was none of that.
Yeah.
It was like watching this great movie and be like, that's the ending? Oh, that stinks.
Hey, Adam, we love you and appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next week. All right, thanks for the insight today. We appreciate it.
My condolences on the game, guys.
Thank you, buddy.